Now, higher rates of unemployment, levels of in-work poverty way out of line with the rest of the population. That's the reality of life for ethnic minority communities in 21st century Scotland. This morning, the Holyrood's Equalities Committee is launching an inquiry to establish what needs to be done to break down the barriers to progress. The committee's convener is Ruth Maguire MSP. She joins me now alongside Professor Nasar, who's a Professor of Race, Identity and Citizenship at the University of Edinburgh. Morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ruth Maguire, first of all, why is there a need for this inquiry?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. The reason my committee is having this inquiry is that despite 40 years of legislation, training initiatives and equality policies, people from our minority ethnic communities in Scotland are still facing poor outcomes, as you say, and that's not good enough, frankly.
And Professor Meer, do you think an inquiry is needed here?
Yes, absolutely. I think that what we know is that despite equivalent levels of skills and education, non-white Scots are much more likely to be unemployed or in low-paid work than their white counterparts. So this is no longer what we might call a supply-side issue. Black and ethnic minority Scots are skilled and qualified, but they're not getting the kinds of jobs that those skills and qualifications should earn them.
And does this apply across the board, regardless maybe of if someone has come to Scotland, maybe later in life, or whether they have been, born here and educated here?
Yes, it does, and that's a striking thing. This is not about a lack or a lag in terms of coming to a new country and learning how things work. It's actually an experience that Scottish-born Black and ethnic minorities experience.
And Ruth Maguire, how are you going to gather evidence for the inquiry? Who will you be hearing from on this?
So the focus of our inquiry is going to be on public authorities, the public sector, because they have a legal obligation to remove barriers faced by people due to race. And I think we're clear that it's structural barriers that are there. This isn't about individuals not being qualified or trained. But who we hope to hear from is individuals themselves, community groups, folk engaged in employment and training programmes, as well as employers from both the public and the private sector.
And Professor Meer, how do you think this can be changed? Do you have to use quite a blunt instrument, whether it be quotas or something like that?
Well, I think we certainly need an outcomes-based approach which will have a coordinated effort across different levels of government and public authorities. So we need to have a sense of what success looks like. If that involves targets and quotas, so be it. But it's something that would work in partnership with skills bodies and intermediary organisations and would be sustainable past any particular life cycle of a government or administration. There's something underlying to some extent here about asking ourselves, what kind of society do we want to live in, and are we able to ask and have difficult conversations and have policy which addresses these kinds of issues.
And Ruth Maguire, do you have any idea of what changes, may come forward as a result of this? What's your gut feeling at the moment as to what might be needed here if we are to have a level playing field in the job market?
I don't want to preempt the evidence we get. I think one of the things I am clear about, though, is this is maybe about the structures within our organisations, because as Professor Meer said, this isn't about supply. We have a wealth of talented, qualified people within our ethnic minority committees. So this isn't just about fairness. This is about missing out on talent. So we're interested to see what comes from our inquiry, our initial inquiries, and then we'll be holding public authorities to account and making sure that whatever action they take is successful. And as Professor Meer says, that it's about outcomes, not just about what activities they're doing, but what activities are working.
And Professor Meer, how do you think this comes about? Is it down to things, like whether it's someone's name on a CV, whether it sounds and looks like a traditional Scottish or British name or not?
It can be, and we have evidence to suggest that if you submit the same CVs detailing the same skills and training but with different names, the white-sounding name will fare a great deal better. So there's something going on at that stage, but also we find that when black and ethnic minority Scots apply for jobs and are shortlisted for interviews, so they have sufficient skills to meet the essential criteria for interview, something happens between interview and appointment, which means that there's a really significant discrepancy. Now, that might be the obvious things. An employer doesn't take a liking to the look of somebody, but it might actually be more indirect things. It might be presumptions about whether somebody would fit into a workplace culture. Would they come for a drink on a Friday afternoon? Do they have the face that kind of suits our company? And that, I think, is a little bit trickier to try to grasp and address.
Yeah, but do you think that can be important, though?
Essential, absolutely essential, because those interpersonal features are often quite important to determining who gets appointed to a particular organisation or not.
And is it, do you think, sort of unintentional racism that's happening?
We know that indirect discrimination happens in the workplace setting. There's a good body of evidence to support that.
Okay. And Ruth Maguire, how long is the process going to take?
So our initial inquiry, our call for evidence is open until the 17th of April, so people have until then to get in touch with us, and they can do that via the committee website. And as I say, we're happy to hear from individuals, groups, as well as employers.
Okay, well, thank you both very much for speaking to us this morning. That's Ruth Maguire MSP, the committee's convener, and Professor Nasar Meer, Professor of Race Identity and Citizenship at the University of Edinburgh. Many thanks. Coming up to 17 minutes to 8.